So let me introduce myself first. Stel Valavanis, I'm the CEO of onShore Security. And the talk is detection is your superpower. The premise is that that's lost on people, and I could tell you from seeing the evolution of IT into more mature practices, cybersecurity being one of them, cybersecurity operations. It's often misunderstood and neglected. There's still a lot of that set and forget kind of thinking. It plugs in. You do. I'm telling you, like a pretty good sized bank client, for instance, walking in the door and talking about firewall management for them, and one of the questions about how they're running things now was all right. What's your process for reviewing, whatever logs and policies and whatnot? And what do you mean? Well, what about the reports you're getting? And well, what do you mean? The firewall does its job. What reports do we need? So I think there's just a misunderstanding of how powerful detection is and how valuable it is. Anyway, so I'll read the kind of the description bit, and this is what was, I don't know where they published it, but this is what the description I gave them. Protecting a network against a hacker used to mean that you had to be on your game 100%, but the hacker only needed to be right once to get in. You guys have all heard that, right? The hacker has to be right. Only has to be, only has to be right, once out of however many attempts, and you have to be right every time to keep the hacker out. And it's true, but with detection, the tables are turned around. This is the powerful thing about detection. They're on your territory. Detection becomes your advantage, and they have to avoid making any mistake. And all you have to do is watch and wait. So here I'm going to get into trying to convince the regular IT person and many cybersecurity people that this is true. So you have a network. You run your business on it. Your office, your data center, your cloud host, your users, your systems, your data. But is it protected? Are your cyber defense systems mature? Can a hacker find a hole? Yes, they can. They're going to keep trying over and over. They're going to keep trying until they succeed. That's their advantage. They can fail and fail. Their bombs could explode and not break down the wall. And that any concern about getting caught, they're out in the wild. That even if you're getting intelligence on them, there's nobody going after them. They're going through layers and layers of hops and VPNs and in safe harbor countries, and at one time you're off your guard, or there's some new vulnerability that comes along. I don't even, what's the latest one? What's the latest big kind of truck-sized hole that has been discovered? Is it, I don't know, the Kaseya one or the Log4j is old now at this point, but still wide out there, out there big time. What was the stuff we saw just yesterday on Microsoft 365 credentials sitting around, in clear text and directories when you're logged into Teams, things like that. They'll find them, they'll get published, they'll get in. So when they find a way in, the internet's so big and so full of targets. If they want to make you a target, you're going to be that. There's always systems, processes that can be exploited. The attack vectors are numerous: DDoS, social engineering, phishing, all kinds of different malware, supply chain attacks. Those scare me the most, to be honest with you, especially since I'm a big open source advocate, and there's enough already on our plates as contributors open source to now have to add to that, managing that, all the poisoning of the supply chain that goes on. Does everybody hear about that thing that happened at the University of Minnesota? They got banned from posting to yeah. And imagine if stuff like that's going on, and probably is, that we're not necessarily catching, there's no process necessarily for catching people like that. they were deliberately stuffing malicious code into source as an experiment. Apparently nothing malicious, just to see if it gets caught. And now there is some process for catching clearly malicious code. Theirs was a little more clever, where there's something not really malicious in one library and then maybe something not so malicious in another, and together those become an attack. But this is going to keep happening, all right? I mean, so, and you know, I mean, and I'm telling you, these are like truck size, right? So, you know, the SolarWinds one, turns out they were in there for 2 years. So that's a commercial company. So don't ever believe anybody who tells you, hey, source code's less secure because it's out there and people can exploit it. All code can be exploited, and if it's open source, at least we get a chance to check it out. If it's commercial, look what happened to SolarWinds. We had no visibility as consumers, you know, of the tech that was going on. Okay, so it's really serious. It's big there. It's big, truck size. But maybe we'll throw more product at it. You know, but this isn't just about protection. Beyond protection, you need detection. When you employ detection, you're leveraging your one irrevocable advantage over the cyber criminal. That very same advantage that the attacker has when they're attacking you. That is, they're only needing to succeed once out of many attempts. Now that's in your hands once they're inside. So every step of theirs needs to be perfect because you have detection everywhere. Now let's remind ourselves, you don't control the internet. Okay, there's a problem that it's gigantic. Hackers can keep attacking and hiding. You don't control all of the different services on there, ports, companies on the net, other countries. It's gigantic, and you use it every day, and you're on it. And it's way too big to police. You can't put controls on it, save for any like outbound routing that you could put in, and partially on inbound. Only if you're big enough to get your ISP to broadcast your own address space and tables. And then these get poisoned by hackers too, by the way. There's been some famous cases recently on that. Of course, our friends, China, had rerouted a big chunk of the internet through them for periods of time by BGP table poisoning. And honestly, really, if we were going to try to go after that part of it, the internet itself, it's really just too big to police. It's, you know, there are controls for domains, for for email and SSL, things like that, do help a lot, but that's just barely a scratch on the surface of what's going on the internet. And honestly, we don't really want to have too many restrictions on the internet because it stymies innovation. So, you know, there's privacy concerns, there's, you know, trade and you know, new ideas for, you know, how things are working. I mean, you know, look at what's happening in the cryptocurrency world, and you know, that's very advanced and needs an open internet to flourish. So it's a good thing, and we don't want to restrict it, but we just want it magically to be more secure. There are things that can be done. There's a larger discussion to be had about enforcement and diplomacy, which I think are the biggest missing parts in internet policing. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about what you can do. Okay, let's talk a little bit about who's out there after you. That's the pirates. And these are criminals. They're trolling the waters. They're attacking at will. They have very few restrictions. We could look at dark web chatter, file dumps, scans, attacks on your network ingress. We can put honeypots out there, collect data about what these attacks are like, and catalog them. And you know, we do that, and we learn, and we make that available to each other as threat intelligence. But that's not the same thing as control. Again, the internet's not your network. But what do you control? You control your network. And in your network, you've got servers. You control them. Operating systems. You control patching and versions, the access to your network, the encryption, the policies. You control workloads. They're on your host, they're in the cloud, and your access to those workloads. Even though you don't control the cloud infrastructure, you still have visibility into the controls the providers have in place for you, even though they slough off the responsibility back to you. but there are tools. And this is getting better, and likely more tools will be available in the cloud. And the cloud providers are starting to admit a little more that they don't magically make you secure. I think they were terribly remiss in the last, many years. I think it's only recent they're starting to admit it. You have SaaS services too. There's configurations on those, authentication. You don't control the SaaS system themselves, but you have visibility into their controls that providers have in place, and you have some responsibility on them. Even with all the push towards this new SASE model, is everybody familiar with that? Secure Access Service Edge, where you can apply controls to points outside of your network. You'll start seeing more SaaS providers playing ball with that, giving you API access to the controls, and for better logging, whatnot. And so there's visibility. Again, not quite controls. And then you have your users. In Office, ideally, but even when they're remote, you can't make them adhere to policies all the time, but you can enforce a great deal, even remotely, and you can get a lot of visibility on their activity. So, finally, you control the whole hybrid kind of network itself: the switches, routers, Wi-Fi access points, virtual switches, VPCs, VPN tunnels, user VPN, segmentation, geofencing, DNS, DHCP, email, all the points of ingress, egress, and lateral. The network itself actually is a very big point of control for you. Now, you can get protections in place on all these systems: firewalls, gateways, segmentation, access control, multi-factor authentication, data loss prevention, content filtering, endpoint protection, CASB, and now some cool SASE stuff. So every one of those controls on this hybrid network of yours is a place to thwart those attackers. This is awesome. This is a good thing. It's getting a lot better. Everybody here, I'm sure, has seen how much better it's gotten, how bad it was in the past. And now that's great. This is the control we can have on our territory increasing, and this is where you can block, you can protect, and you can thwart the criminals. Awesome. And they'll still get in. And they'll get in because all they have to do is keep trying. And they keep trying as long as they don't get caught. And so this is why you need to look at detection. Detection is your superpower. We need to catch them, not just block them. We need detection, because without it, then protection just provides a false confidence. So I want you to think about every one of these points on the network we talked about: the systems, point of egress for an attacker. Any of these are tripwires. If monitored correctly and matched, like correlated with other activity, they can catch bad actors very fast. Every single protection system, like firewalls, endpoint, web filtering, microsegmentation controls, they're all detection systems too. And we have to stop thinking about them just as protection systems. Even telling you that what got blocked, even that data point you get is very valuable, because you see what attackers are after, what their tactics are, what vulnerabilities they think you have. And that's extremely valuable context to match against the activity you see inside your network to identify that malicious activity. It's much more powerful than any out of context threat intelligence feed you can get. What do these attackers want? I'm gonna put this in the form of a story. Okay, here's an attacker or a criminal. Maybe they work for a government. Either way, they want to gain access to your network, to your systems, be they in your office or a cloud hosting provider. There's a hybrid network, SaaS applications. They want into those systems because the information there will help them make money or give them access to vendors and clients, or have some other kind of geopolitical purpose. And regardless, you're responsible. And what they do is first that they scan your network, or pick up from a spray of scans their botnets had performed. Their IP addresses are obscured, of course, and they're using pwn servers, whatnot, VPNs, and then they'll find an exploit. They find a set of ports open by printers that were installed with auto, configuring with wide network access, true, still a very open problem. Some of these, discoveries sometimes inadvertently include, firewall subnets in their phone to home, and that stuff can be harvested. Or maybe they ran a set of stolen passwords against a mail account or some SaaS service, and they use that to inject malware and then get them a backdoor. Email still is the most common vector today because it's a big attack surface, of course, and a lot of users all accepting connections. And they find a way in. And now they need some time. They got to work. They look at what's right around to find the jewels, or just some way to entrench themselves, maybe cover their tracks even. They need time. Now, those internal protections we talked about do slow them down. But they're tripwires along the place. Now they have to be careful to either disable anti-malware or find ways to get around those tripwires. They use existing software because they know that new software is a tripwire against something that would be seen. They probe other devices on their local subnet, hoping that network tripwires only cover that core network. In cloud systems, they scan for known vulnerabilities. Large majority of attackers exploit known vulnerabilities, and cloud providers are full of them. There's a really good GitHub link if anybody's interested that goes into some pretty exhaustive detail of all the default bad configurations you get in various cloud providers. It's significant. But eventually they find that payload. They find a database with some high privileges for compromised credentials, user data, PII, client data, trade secrets. That's a big one I was having a conversation about before. There are hackers looking for data about M&A activity so they can trade stocks on that. It's all there. Now it's time to pack it up and ship it offline. But the cyber defenders are waiting. How are they doing that? They've been watching. That open printer port may have been an oversight, something that would eventually have been closed up, but now that access was logged, and even better, triggered an alert for inbound traffic, not matching a public service rule. Those scans across the subnets, even when they fail, are logged, and they trigger alerts. Elevated privileges on a workstation, uncommon destinations or imbalance of producer-consumer ratio, failed authentication attempts, data patterns matching account numbers, servers being accessed from unknown sources, that all trips that wire, raises an alert. And the attack is stopped, and the hole is plugged. Alarm goes off. Defenders now know where to look and what to fix. So this is your advantage. And attackers know this, so they're very careful not to get caught. The longer they can be in, the longer they can harvest valuable data and entrench themselves. The average dwell time has come down in recent years, but still around 100 days. The attackers who had infiltrated SolarWinds, for instance, and through them several government agencies, they were inside. Their code was inside SolarWinds for again, close to 2 years. Even ransomware attackers who are looking for a quick buck can't actually act quite so fast. They need to make sure that there are enough systems and backups before they detonate. That could take days or weeks. And the main reason they're found faster than other attacks is because they're found the hard way by detonating their payload. So, make it your superpower. Because they need this time to do their work. They are at a disadvantage. Once they're in, they are at a disadvantage. They cannot get caught because they get stopped. They're counting on weaknesses so they can go undetected. They're counting on inside systems to be trusted and less scrutinized. But you can be super and look everywhere. So where are we looking? Well, everywhere is hard to do, and the investment can escalate. The talk before this talked about diminishing returns, and that's very, very true. There's a point, the more you spend, the incrementally smaller value you get. But considering that you control all these points on the network, servers, workstations, routers, switches, firewalls, cameras, phones, they're all your eyes and ears. And the way you configure them, the very same rules you employ for protection also become detection. Every time you're configuring protection, you think, what does this do for me for detection? And then you need to correlate and analyze this data. This is how it works. The magic comes from logging the activity where those narrow rules are applied. On a server, it's things like attempts to log in from an IP address that normally doesn't log to it and get blocked by the host firewall or microsegmentation agent. This can be determined by profiling your servers during a tuning process or by whitelisting. On a network switch, that has traffic generated between blocked subnets. Those are alerts. On a workstation, memory reads were blocked by anti-malware software. Again, we don't want to just block it. We want to report that activity. In all cases, these protections worked, but they did more than that. They generated alerts that represent a trail to follow and find an attacker. Every node, every protection system, every rule or policy, every user, and they're all your source of power, and the tables are turned. But for the superpower of detection to really work, you need to be capturing this data, and you need to be capturing network activity as a layer independent from the computers generating the activity, so it can be correlated with system data and acted upon. This is initially done with a log collector, but network traffic are packets and headers, not a system log. So network sensors, an IDS system also need to be in place. Host-based sensors also complement the large mix of logs coming from authenticated systems, EDR system software, DLP software, firewalls, you name it. Today, the log collector feeds into a management system, typically a SIM. The term XDR is out there these days too. I can talk about the difference. I got a little bit of a glossary here coming up. The SIM gives you tools for alerting and reporting, but because attacks can be very sophisticated, there's another layer of analysis needed, one that allows for threat hunting, tuning, and anomaly detection. Big data tools such as Elastic and Kibana make large sets of cybersecurity data manageable and lets the analysts create tripwires that are derivatives of network behavior, catching even the most sophisticated hackers. And together, I call this service MDR. The industry keeps moving around, and Gartner has self-proclaimed themselves the kings of the acronyms, but I call this managed detection and response. It might mean different things to different people, but ultimately it's the addition of human beings watching and making sense of the fire hose of data that is the distinction. Otherwise, it's just a protection system, blocking threats, but not providing any intelligence. And there's more to it than that. Detection, than simply just being your superpower against attackers. Along with catching the crooks, you also maintain a large set of data for forensics. It's kind of like you could call that a side benefit. That's something that can make a 7-figure difference in liability when you demonstrate what data was or wasn't exfiltrated in an attack. So it's no wonder that all cybersecurity frameworks call for it, and government regulations are now catching up. Compliance and government industry requirements are not only satisfied with an MDR service, they are enhanced with a clear demonstration of security functions. Many compliance violations are also detected in the process. So every step of the way, every threat thwarted, compliance checked off, audit data reviewed, violations detected, anomalous behavior investigated, that network becomes tighter, stronger, tougher for the attacker to go in and get undetected. I should mention a few testing components here that are really important to understand. Probably none of this is lost to anybody here, but this is something that's a little more mature, but it's also very important. Testing is also very important. MDR services thrive on data, but that's not only live data, it's also the not quite static data of network and system configurations. So typically a vuln scan done regularly provides this and can even be run on a continuous basis to provide trending data and aid in vulnerability management. Regardless, it's a valuable set of data that provides context for the analyst to narrow the haystack with. Penetration testing, where a hired hacker's asked to attempt a break-in, is more of a true test, but more importantly, also a data point for further context for the defenders. So a pen tester doesn't want to get caught either, certainly not before they find a path in. They have advantages over the hacker in that they're, because so if they get caught, they're not in trouble necessarily, but that makes their findings actually even more valuable. So, A few of the relevant terms I want to throw out there. Just for some clarification, some of the terms in industry uses aren't consistent and they change over time and are overlapping. Primarily we've discussed what's called MDR, Managed Detection and Response here, this process. This is a service that employs many tools that comprise a platform utilized by analysts and engineers for detection. The components vary a good bit by provider. In onShore, our Panoptic platform, which means all-seeing. There's the Panoptic sensor, which is deployed across points on the network and in the cloud, and the Panoptic SIM, which utilizes the elastic set of big data tools for visualization and analysis as a default. Per client, there are also logging and intrusion detection agents installed on servers and workstations, network access controllers, network traffic aggregators, XDR systems, DLP systems, and others. I was mentioning before about XDR. It's come into fashion as a term. I see it more as an elevation of EDR, like a tight integration with an endpoint detection tool, expanding into additional data. It doesn't really replace the SIM, which has already been doing all that, but overlaps and can, in some environments, that could be kind of I consider like a little lighter weight way to get some kind of MDR. If you're integrated with network telemetry, especially, and you're providing, tuning at the network level, then the term network detection response also applies. So let's give you a little summary here. Detection is your superpower. Use it. Make every protection system, including your users, also a detection system. Feed that data into one place where it can be analyzed. Put a process in place for ongoing analysis of the data to find the attackers early and tighten up every day. Work with government and industry to demonstrate high security and compliance. Be ready for when you do get attacked to quickly respond, informed with data that can provide attestation of methods and impact, and be safe. There's my presentation. Any thoughts? Everybody doing detection? Yes. Cool. Anybody here at the helm of a SIM? At the helm, yeah? And right, I remember we talked logarithm, right? Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. Data correlation and writing new rules on the derivatives of those network data and whatnot. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, if we don't have any more thoughts or any discussion, we can conclude. And anybody else, any questions or thoughts, discussion points? No? All right. Well, I hope you got some good ideas. Thanks, everybody.